The pen felt unusually heavy in my hand. I stared at the document in front of me, page 12 of what should have been a simple property transfer, when I felt a hand brush against my shoulder. The young woman leaning over to refill my water glass whispered so softly I almost missed it. "Don't sign page 12. Check the property description first." Then she was gone, moving to the next client in the crowded law office waiting room, leaving me frozen with my granddaughter Madison smiling expectantly across the desk. Let me back up. My name is Eleanor Hayes, and at 67 years old, I thought I'd seen every trick in the real estate business. I'd spent 42 years as a licensed real estate agent in Portland, Oregon, building a reputation for honesty in a field that didn't always reward it. I'd helped hundreds of families find their dream homes, navigate complex transactions, and avoid predatory schemes. I'd seen it all, or so I believed. After my husband James passed away 3 years ago from pancreatic cancer, I'd sold our large family home in the West Hills and moved into a beautiful craftsman bungalow in the Hawthorne district. It was perfect for me. 2 bedrooms, a garden I could actually maintain, and enough equity from the sale to ensure I'd never be a financial burden on anyone. The house was mine, free and clear, worth about $650,000 in Portland's inflated market. My granddaughter Madison was 28, my only son David's daughter. David and his wife had divorced when Madison was 12, and she'd spent most of her teenage years bouncing between households, never quite settling. She'd dropped out of college twice, worked a string of retail jobs, and had a pattern of dating men who seemed to bring out the worst in her. But she was family, and after James died, she'd been attentive in a way that touched my heart. Weekly visits, help with grocery shopping, calls just to check in. I'd felt guilty for ever doubting her. Then she met Trevor. Trevor Kaufman appeared in Madison's life about 8 months ago. He was 34, worked in cryptocurrency consulting, whatever that meant, and had a smile that never quite reached his eyes. He drove a leased BMW, wore expensive watches, and talked endlessly about investment opportunities and generational wealth building. Madison became obsessed with him, with his lifestyle, with his promises of financial freedom. The shift in her behavior was gradual. The weekly visits became bi-weekly, then monthly. When she did come by, Trevor was always with her, and the conversation inevitably turned to my underutilized asset, my house. "Grandma, you're sitting on over $500,000, Madison said one Sunday afternoon in March, while Trevor nodded enthusiastically beside her. "You could sell this place, move into a nice senior community, and invest the difference. Trevor knows people who've tripled their money in 6 months." I'd smiled politely and changed the subject. I'd been in real estate long enough to recognize a pitch, and alarm bells were already ringing softly in the back of my mind. But I loved Madison. She was my only grandchild, and despite her poor choices, I wanted to believe she had my best interests at heart. So when she called in early April, crying about being evicted from her apartment because Trevor's investment had fallen through, I'd offered to let her stay in my guest room temporarily. That was my first mistake. Madison moved in with 2 suitcases and Trevor. I'd explicitly said Trevor couldn't stay, but he was there every evening, leaving late and arriving early, until eventually he just never left. They took over my guest room, my bathroom, my peace. The suggestions started immediately. "This house is too much for you to maintain alone," Madison said, watching me struggle with a stuck window. She no longer helped. She observed and commented. "You're spending too much on property taxes and utilities," Trevor added, showing me spreadsheets he'd created on my expenses. "You could be generating passive income instead of hemorrhaging money." "We're worried about you, Grandma," Madison said one evening, her voice dripping with false concern. "What if you fall? What if something happens and no one's here to help? You should really think about your future." The pressure was subtle at first, then increasingly aggressive. They'd leave real estate listings for senior apartments on the kitchen table. Trevor would calculate my lost opportunity cost out loud during dinner. Madison started making comments about how I was forgetting things and getting confused, even though my mind was sharp as ever. Then the pills appeared. In late April, Madison presented me with a bottle of supplements. Grandma, Trevor's wellness coach, recommended these. They're for cognitive function and energy. You've been so tired lately. I hadn't been tired. But to keep the peace, I'd taken them for a few days. Within 48 hours, I felt genuinely foggy, disoriented. My hands trembled. I'd forget why I'd walked into a room. When I looked at the bottle more carefully, I couldn't find any FDA approval or even a clear list of ingredients, just vague terms like proprietary herbal blend. I stopped taking them immediately and hid the bottle. Within 2 days, my head cleared. That's when I knew something was deeply wrong. I started paying attention. Really paying attention. I noticed Trevor photographing documents when he thought I wasn't looking. I found my filing cabinet unlocked when I knew I'd secured it. Madison was asking pointed questions about my will, my bank accounts, my safe deposit box. They whispered constantly. Conversations that stopped the moment I entered the room. Then came the appointment. "Grandma, we've scheduled you a meeting with an estate planning attorney," Madison announced one morning in early May. "You need to update your will and make sure everything's in order." We made the appointment for Friday at 2. I started. "You haven't updated anything since Grandpa died," she interrupted, her voice sharp. "What if something happens? We're trying to help you." I agreed to go, mostly to see what they were planning. The office was in a newer building downtown, professional looking, the kind of place that charged premium rates. The attorney, a man named Richard Voss, was smooth and polished, with the kind of smile that reminded me of Trevor's all-surface, no warmth. "Mrs. Hayes," he said, shaking my hand. "Your granddaughter has explained your situation. You want to ensure she's taken care of, and you're concerned about potential estate taxes and probate complications. Very wise to plan ahead." I hadn't said any of that, but Madison jumped in before I could clarify. "That's right. Grandma wants to make sure the house goes to family without any government interference. She's worried about tax burdens." We'd sat in his office for 30 minutes while he explained various strategies, most of which involved transferring assets now rather than waiting for probate. Madison sat beside me, squeezing my hand, playing the devoted granddaughter. Trevor waited in the lobby, checking his phone. Finally, Voss slid a thick stack of documents across his desk. "This is a quitclaim deed transferring your Hawthorne property to Madison, along with a power of attorney for financial decisions and healthcare directives. It's the cleanest way to avoid estate taxes and ensure she can care for you if your health declines." Standard stuff. Standard stuff. Except I'd handled enough real estate transactions to know a quitclaim deed meant giving up all ownership rights immediately. No protections. No guarantees. Just a complete transfer of my $650,000 asset to Madison, who'd then let me continue living there out of the goodness of her heart. My chest tightened. Anger and hurt warred inside me, making it hard to breathe. This was my granddaughter, the little girl I'd taught to bake cookies, sitting beside me plotting to steal my home. "I need to review these," I said, reaching for the documents. "Mrs. Hayes, there's really no need," Voss said smoothly. "Your granddaughter and I have gone over everything. It's quite standard. If you'd just sign pages 4, 9, and 12. "I'd like to read them," I said firmly. Madison's hand tightened on mine, her nails digging into my skin. "Grandma, Mr. Voss is very busy. We don't want to waste his time. He's doing us a favor seeing us today." That's when the paralegal appeared. She was young, maybe 25, with dark hair pulled back in a professional bun and intelligent brown eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. She'd been introduced as Sarah Chen when we first arrived, and she'd been quietly organizing files in the corner of the office. Now she approached with a water pitcher, offering to refill glasses, a routine courtesy. As she leaned over to fill my glass, she positioned herself between Voss's line of sight and me. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Don't sign page 12. Check the property description first." Then she straightened, smiled professionally, and left the room. My heart hammered. I looked down at the documents with new eyes, flipping to page 12. To anyone glancing casually, it looked like the signature page for the quitclaim deed. But as I read carefully, I saw it. The property description didn't match my house. The legal description listed my property as Lot 7, Block 12, Hawthorne Edition. But my actual property was Lot 7, Block 14. A small change, barely noticeable, except that Lot 7, Block 12 didn't exist. It was a vacant lot that had been absorbed into a street expansion in the 1,970 seconds. If I signed this document, I'd be transferring ownership of nothing. And the power of attorney pages? They gave Madison control of everything I actually did own, with no limitations, no oversight. It was elegant fraud. I'd sign away my authority while believing I'd protected my house, and then Madison and Trevor would have complete access to my bank accounts, my actual property, everything. Actually, I said, my voice steady despite the rage burning in my chest, I'm not feeling well. I think I need to reschedule. This is a lot to process. Madison's face went pale. Grandma, we're here now. Just sign. I said I need to reschedule. I stood, gathering the documents. I'll take these to review with my own attorney. Mrs. Hayes, those documents need to stay here, Voss said, reaching for them. These are papers about my property and my life. I'm taking them. I tucked them into my purse. My hands were shaking, but my voice was ice. Madison, I'll meet you at the car. I walked out, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. In the lobby, I saw Sarah Chen at the reception desk. Our eyes met for just a moment. She gave the tiniest nod, then looked away. I made it to Madison's car and sat in the passenger seat, documents clutched in my lap. Madison came out 5 minutes later, Trevor beside her. Both looked furious. What the hell was that? Madison demanded as she started the car. I told you, I don't feel well. You embarrassed me in front of Mr. Voss. He's doing us a favor. Doing us a favor? I turned to look at her. Really look at her. Madison, who found that attorney? Was it Trevor? She didn't answer, which was answer enough. The drive home was silent. When we pulled into my driveway, I got out without a word and went straight to my bedroom, locking the door. I heard them arguing in the living room, their voices rising and falling. Then Trevor's voice, clear and angry. The old bitch is going to ruin everything. We need a backup plan. I sat on my bed. The documents spread out before me, and I cried, not just for the betrayal, but for the little girl Madison had been, for the relationship we'd lost, for the grandmother I'd thought I was. Then I stopped crying and started planning. My 42 years in real estate hadn't just taught me about property law. They'd taught me about people, about documentation, about building an airtight case. If Madison and Trevor wanted to play games with real estate fraud, they'd picked the wrong target. First, I needed help. I couldn't do this alone, and I certainly couldn't trust anyone they might have connections with. I thought about Sarah Chen, the paralegal who'd risked her job to warn me. The next morning, after Madison and Trevor left for one of their meetings, I called the law office. I'd like to speak with Sarah Chen, please, I said when the receptionist answered. I'm sorry, Miss Chen is no longer with our firm. My stomach dropped. As of when? She was let go yesterday afternoon. I can't provide any more information. They'd fired her. For helping me. The thought made me sick, but it also steeled my resolve. I found Sarah's LinkedIn profile and sent her a message. Thank you for your warning. I'd like to hire you privately if you're available. Please call me. I included my number. She called within an hour. We met at a coffee shop in Selwood, far from my neighborhood. Sarah looked nervous, checking over her shoulder, clutching a folder to her chest. Mrs. Hayes, I shouldn't have interfered, she said as soon as we sat down. I could get in serious trouble. You already lost your job protecting me, I said gently. The least I can do is hire you properly. I'll pay you better than Voss did, and I need someone I can trust. She hesitated, then opened her folder. I made copies before they fired me. I could be disbarred before I even finish law school for this, but Mrs. Hayes, your granddaughter isn't the first. Voss has been running this scam for at least 2 years. Elderly clients come in, usually brought by younger family members, and sign documents they don't understand. I've watched it happen 6 times since I started there last fall. She showed me patterns. 3 other seniors in Portland had transferred properties using similar documents with incorrect legal descriptions. In each case, the family member then used power of attorney to drain bank accounts and refinance the actual properties, loading them with debt before abandoning the elderly victim. "Why haven't you reported this?" I asked. "I tried. I went to the Oregon State Bar 3 months ago. They said they'd investigate, but nothing happened. Voss has connections. And the victims," she looked down, "they're often too embarrassed or confused to testify. Their families convince them they're imagining things, or they're too ashamed to admit their own grandchildren betrayed them." "I'm not confused," I said firmly, "and I'm not going to be quiet. Will you help me?" Sarah looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. "I'll help you. But Mrs. Hayes, this is going to get ugly. Are you prepared for that?" I thought about Madison, the little girl who'd called me her best friend. I thought about Trevor's smug face. I thought about the other victims Sarah described, elderly people abandoned and destitute. "I'm prepared," I said. Over the next 2 weeks, Sarah and I built our case. I wore a small recording device every day legal in Oregon with single-party consent and documented every conversation with Madison and Trevor. The recordings were damning. Trevor, discussing their timeline. "Once we have the POA, we can refinance. The old lady won't even know until it's done. By the time she figures it out, we'll be in the Bahamas." Madison, on the phone with someone I didn't recognize. "She's being stubborn about signing. Trevor thinks we need to increase the dosage, make her more compliant." That comment about dosage sent chills down my spine. I'd been right about those pills. I also hired a private investigator, a retired police detective named Marcus Webb. Within a week, he'd uncovered Trevor's history: 2 previous fraud arrests, both dismissed on technicalities, and a pattern of targeting women with elderly relatives. Madison wasn't his first accomplice. There had been 2 others, both young women from unstable backgrounds, both now facing criminal charges in other states. Madison was a victim too, I realized. A willing one, perhaps, but Trevor had clearly manipulated her, exploited her resentment about her parents' divorce, her financial struggles, her desire for easy money. It didn't excuse what she'd done, but it added another layer to the tragedy. I couldn't stay in that house with them. The pretense was suffocating, and I was genuinely afraid they might try something more drastic. So I told them I was visiting my sister in Seattle for a week. I didn't have a sister, but they didn't know that, and I checked into a extended stay hotel near the airport. From there, Sarah and I coordinated with the Oregon State Bar, the Portland Police Bureau, and an attorney I'd known professionally for years, Patricia Morales. Patricia specialized in elder law and was furious when she heard the full story. "Eleanor, I've heard rumors about Voss, but nothing concrete," she said during our first meeting. "Your documentation is exactly what we need. Are you willing to testify?" "Absolutely. It won't be easy. Madison is your granddaughter. The defense will paint you as a vindictive old woman trying to punish her for some imagined slight." "Let them try," I said. "I have recordings. I have witnesses. I have documentation. And I have 42 years of professional credibility in this city." We filed complaints with every relevant authority: the Oregon State Bar against Voss, the Portland Police Bureau against Trevor and Madison for attempted fraud and elder abuse, and a civil suit to recover damages and establish a protective order. The arrest happened on June 3rd. Madison and Trevor were at my house. They'd been staying there even while I was in Seattle, treating it like their own property when police arrived with a warrant. I wasn't there. I couldn't watch. But Marcus, who'd coordinated with the police, called me afterward. "They got them both," he said. "Trevor tried to run. Your granddaughter broke down crying, saying she didn't know it was illegal, that Trevor had told her it was all proper estate planning. My heart broke a little more. The evidence against them was overwhelming. The recordings alone were enough, but combined with Trevor's history, the fraudulent documents from Voss, and testimony from Sarah about the pattern of abuse, the prosecutor called it one of the clearest cases of elder financial abuse she'd seen. Richard Voss was disbarred and charged separately with fraud and conspiracy. The Oregon State Bar launched a full investigation and found evidence of at least 9 victims. Sarah's earlier complaint was vindicated, and she was offered a position at the Bar Association, helping investigate similar cases. The hardest part came 3 months later, the preliminary hearing. I had to sit in a courtroom and face Madison across a prosecutor's table. She looked so young, so scared, her hands shaking as she clutched a tissue. Trevor sat beside her, his smugness finally cracked, his expensive suit wrinkled. Patricia had warned me about this moment. "You're going to want to protect her," she'd said. "You're going to see your granddaughter and remember her as a child, and you're going to want to make this go away. Don't." She made her choices. She needs to face the consequences. When it was my turn to testify, I told the truth. All of it. The pills that made me foggy, the manipulation, the overheard conversations about dosages and timelines, the fraudulent documents, the systematic isolation and gaslighting. Madison's attorney tried to cross-examine me, suggesting I was confused, that I'd misunderstood innocent conversations, that I was estranged from my granddaughter and this was revenge. I looked him in the eye and said, "I spent 42 years in real estate. I've handled millions of dollars in transactions. I've negotiated complex deals and identified fraud more sophisticated than this. I am not confused. I was targeted because they thought my love for my granddaughter made me an easy mark. They were wrong." The courtroom was silent. In the end, Trevor Kaufman was sentenced to 6 years in federal prison for wire fraud, elder abuse, and conspiracy. He'd been communicating with partners in 3 other states, running similar schemes. His sentence reflected the full scope of his operation. Madison faced a choice: go to trial or accept a plea deal. Patricia and I had discussed this extensively. "What do you want?" Patricia asked me one evening as we reviewed options. "I want her to get help," I said quietly. "Real help. She's 28 years old, and she's thrown away her life for a con man. I want her to face consequences, but I also want her to have a chance to become the person she could have been." The plea deal we negotiated was strict. 5 years probation, 2 years of which would be intensive supervision, mandatory psychological counseling and substance abuse treatment. They found evidence she'd been using cocaine with Trevor. 200 hours of community service, specifically working with elder abuse prevention organizations, full restitution of all legal costs, and permanent loss of any inheritance rights from me. She accepted it. The day of her sentencing, I was allowed to give a victim impact statement. I stood at the podium, looking at Madison's tear-stained face, and I spoke from my heart. "Madison, you were my only grandchild. I loved you unconditionally, the way grandparents do. You used that love as a weapon against me. You drugged me. You lied to me. You planned to steal my home and leave me destitute. Those are the facts, and they will always be true. But I also know you were manipulated. I know Trevor exploited your vulnerabilities, your financial struggles, your desire to matter to someone. That doesn't excuse what you did, but it explains part of it. I hope you use these next 5 years to become someone worthy of the second chance you're receiving. I hope you learn that love isn't a transaction, that family isn't a resource to exploit. I hope you find real help and real healing. I won't be part of your life anymore. I can't. The trust is broken beyond repair, but I will be watching, and I will be hoping that you prove capable of change." She sobbed through the entire statement. I don't know if my words reached her. I hope they did. After the legal proceedings concluded, I had to rebuild my life. The house that had been my sanctuary felt contaminated now, filled with memories of betrayal, I sold it, ironically. I handled the sale myself and moved to a smaller condo in the Pearl District with excellent security and a tight-knit community of other retirees. But I couldn't just retire into quiet solitude. I'd learned too much about elder abuse, about how common it was, about how many people were suffering in silence. I partnered with Sarah Chen, who'd completed her law degree and passed the bar exam. Together, we founded a nonprofit organization called Silver Shield, dedicated to protecting seniors from financial exploitation. We offer free legal consultations, educational workshops on recognizing abuse, and advocacy services. I volunteer 20 hours a week using my real estate expertise to help seniors understand their property rights, identify fraud, and protect their assets. I speak at community centers, senior living facilities, anywhere people will listen. The work is hard. Every case reminds me of Madison, of how easily love can be weaponized, of how vulnerable we all become. But it's also healing. Every person we help is a small redemption, a way to transform my pain into protection for others. Sarah became more than a colleague. She became the granddaughter of my heart, not replacing Madison, but filling a space that had been empty. She calls me every Sunday, brings me soup when I'm sick, asks my advice about her cases and her life. She chose me, and I chose her, and that choice means everything. 6 months after Madison's sentencing, I received a letter from her. It came to my attorney's office. She didn't have my new address, and Patricia called to ask if I wanted to receive it. I hesitated, then said yes. The letter was 6 pages long, handwritten, tear-stained. She wrote about her therapy, about realizing how deeply Trevor had manipulated her, about the resentment she'd carried since her parents' divorce that had made her vulnerable to his influence. She wrote about the other women in her court-ordered support group, other young people who'd been groomed into elder abuse by romantic partners or friends. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She didn't ask to see me. She just wrote, "Grandma, I understand now what I tried to steal from you. It wasn't just a house or money. It was your security, your dignity, your trust in the people you loved. I can never give that back. I can only try to become someone who would never take it in the first place. I'm trying. Every day, I'm trying." I read that letter 3 times, then put it in a drawer. I didn't respond. Maybe someday I will. Maybe someday she'll have earned a response. But not yet. Now, at 68, I live a quieter life, but a purposeful one. My condo is small, but filled with light. My days are structured around Silver Shield work, coffee with friends I've made in my building, and the simple pleasure of making my own choices without fear. I think about trust sometimes, about how it's both our greatest strength and our deepest vulnerability. I loved Madison without reservation, and she used that love to nearly destroy me. But I also met Sarah because I was vulnerable, and Marcus, and Patricia, and dozens of other people who helped me when I needed it most. The lesson isn't to stop trusting. It's to trust wisely, to verify, to listen to warning voices like that young paralegal who risked everything to whisper the truth, to remember that sometimes the family we choose is more loyal than the family we're born with. I keep a photo on my desk, me and Sarah, at the opening of Silver Shield's office, both of us smiling, holding a banner that reads, "Protecting our elders, preserving their dignity." Behind us, you can see Marcus and Patricia, a group of volunteers, and our first clients, 3 seniors we'd helped recover assets stolen by family members. It's not the family photo I imagined having at this age, but it's real, and it's built on choice and respect rather than obligation and exploitation. And every time I help someone recognize the warning signs of financial abuse, every time I teach a workshop on protecting assets, every time Sarah calls with news of another victory, I think about that moment in Richard Voss's office. That whispered warning from a brave young woman who saw wrong and chose to act. Don't sign page 12. 3 words that saved my life and gave me a new purpose. 3 words that reminded me I wasn't alone, even when I felt most betrayed. I tell every senior I work with, listen to those warning voices, trust your instincts, and remember, It's never too late to stand up for yourself, to demand justice, to rebuild from betrayal. I'm proof of that. My name is Eleanor Hayes, and at 68 years old, I'm not a victim. I'm a survivor, an advocate, and a testament to the truth that sometimes our greatest betrayals lead us to our most important callings. And I'm just getting started.